We are awakening together. This is our weekly gathering we hold online. For more information, visit our website, awakening-together.org. We'd love to see you there.
Hey, everyone. Sina sounds so calm. I might not sound so friggin' calm today. The ego here did not want to come and share what I'm going to share today. And it has been after me all week long. But I'm here and I'm going to do it. You got that? But first, let's go through those things we have to go through first. Today, the name of this homily is Dropping the Mirror. And as we move forward, you'll hopefully see what I mean by dropping the mirror. Let me share the statement of purpose for today's homily, as well as our general statement of purpose. So, of course, as you all know, we are awakening together. We are an assembly of equals, and we are joined in common purpose, which is awakening to one true self. Within an appearance of many faiths, many cultures, and many symbols, we seek to discern one truth and to rest in its embrace. And I think the homily today is definitely about that. Of the core values, I actually picked core value number 1. We trust everyone is led by unique inner guidance, because I'm going to be sharing some unique inner guidance today. At least it's unique for me. We trust everyone is led by unique inner guidance to one experience called awakening, which is realization of one true self. We live this value by supporting one another on different paths of awakening. So that's the core value for today. And again, I will be sharing the individual guidance that I am getting now. So this is a new clarity for me. And as most new clarities, when they arrive, it is fuzzy. Fuzzy because, of course, the ego fights it. The ego resists it. And so my prayer is to clarify this wisdom today, to clarify it for this one, for me, and to clarify it for any other minds that are present, that are ready to hear any part of this message. As Jesus would often say, for those who have ears to hear. There is great resistance to delivering this message, and I welcome that resistance. Because what I have learned as I have walked this path is when the ego screams the loudest, is when we're on the right track. So thank you, ego, for letting me know I'm heading in the right direction. And spirit, wisdom, insights, make yourself known today. Amen. All right, there we go. So now it is time for our reading, and Reverend Glen Ganaway has graciously accepted to be the reader today. He's going to be reading excerpts from a book that I just finished reading called Awake, It's Your Turn by Angelo Dilullo. And Glenn, I hand the mic to you.
Wonderful. Got me out of my PJs early. Excerpts from Awake, It's Your Turn by Angelo Dilullo. In this first excerpt, Angelo talks about being awake to the second principle of God, the I Am presence, and talks about the obstacle that can keep us stuck at that level of awakening. Quote, while this adjustment can be confusing and disorienting time, it is laying the groundwork for something very unexpected and wondrous. If you think it's strange to live in a world where you identify as universal consciousness and everything contained therein, as well as nothing at all, just wait. we're going to redefine strange, but in a good way. You could say that this phase is a sort of staging area. Reality is simply setting up the conditions to launch you into a world of mystery beyond comprehension. Just as with the previous stage, there is a potential trap here. In my experience, it's common that we get stuck in this trap for a time. Because identity has become so thin at this stage, it is not obvious at all that we are fixating. There can be an overemphasis on the darkness or the formless aspect here. This makes sense from a level of realization because this reflective nature, regardless of what it's reflecting or not reflecting, is the most fundamental aspect of identity. The problem and trap here are that we're still holding on to the paradigm of identity itself. It can be extremely easy to overlook this assumption that identity is an actual thing, because the sense of identity has been with us for so long and feels quite familiar. This assumption is not just a conceptual fixation. It is deeply felt and is so intrinsic to the experience of being a someone that it is easily overlooked. The seeming selfless self, or I without an I, is being taken as an identity. It's as if we've become so tired of inhabiting a positive identity that we unknowingly adopt a negative identity. We identify as what is not there, but overlook the reality that the underlying mechanism of identity is still functioning. Still, there is a deepening natural enjoyment with practice and with life. There becomes a lot of crossover between what you previously considered spiritual life and regular day-to-day living. The investigation is ongoing. The commitment to furthering realization is usually, but not always, quite strong at this point. End quote. In the remaining excerpts, Angelo talks about awakening to the first principle of God, which he calls liberation. Quote, the sense that there is a world or a container of experience, sort of like a substratum, and a perceiving entity navigating that world seems like just the way things had to be. Now, it's clear that the seeming substratum that contained the dark and the light doesn't exist on its own in this reality. It is seen to have always been part of the intimate textures of zero-distance experience. With that recognition, the phenomena themselves take on a new degree of integrity, clarity, and perfection. When there is no relational matrix, every discrete phenomena is naturally expanded to infinite significance. In this world of the actual, there is also a noticeable absence of another characteristic that seemed quite inherent to the reflective world. Even though the reflective world seemed to offer tremendous variation in experiences, events, and objects, it carried with it a certain intrinsic weight that had gone unnoticed. This unnoticed burden, somewhat like a tether or an anchor, was impossible to appreciate until it was finally released by looking away from the reflection. This tether, this weight, was the sense that this was somehow happening to or for a central character earlier, or universal awareness later, called me. There was only ever the real. You could say that now you experience yourself as everything, but importantly, there is no yourself. So there's just everything. That everything is crisp, vivid, undeniable, and has no apartness to it. The reflective nature of consciousness, self-referencing, made things appear as if there was a noticer and that which was noticed, a person and a life that person was living, objects out there and a subject here, navigating those objects. This ranges in scale from the macro, life events and beliefs, time and space, down to the discrete, a single sound, sensation, shape, taste, or smell. In realization, this is what I refer to as liberation. It can happen suddenly, and it can happen gradually, but the relational, reflective framework of experience we perceive that creates the illusion of separation subsides. Technically, this is the end of the entanglement with consciousness that was creating the sense of a discrete self apart from the world. Now there is sound. There is only sound, pristine, complete, and all-pervasive. When there is a color or a shape, there is only that color, only that shape, impossibly vivid, and not apart from anything. Anything. There are only trees with no observer. There are only stars with no one watching them. There is only the moon with no one gazing upon it. The awareness of the dazzling dance of color has collapsed into the colors themselves. Color does the seeing, sound does the hearing, sensation does the feeling, sensation is the feeling. With this collapse of the seeing into the colors and the feeler into the sensations and the thinker into the thought, there is also a collapse of the individual into everything. This is somewhat like a self-propagating and self-dissolving cloud of radiant and pure, no experiencer, experience. Whether it's a car, the hum of a fan, or a voice, there's no one hearing it. The hearing is intrinsic to the sound. The experiencer has fully collapsed into the experience, and it is seen that this is the natural way. There's no longer the possibility to stand apart and observe, as seemed to be happening before. Instead, the sense of observing is seen to have been a simple misreading of the nature of reflective consciousness. An analogy I sometimes use is this. Imagine you are walking down a hallway. Only the portion of the hallway you can occupy is illuminated at any given time. So, as you pass a certain area, the lights behind you go out. Similarly, as you enter a new area of the hallway, the lights begin to turn on. Ahead and behind, there's darkness. Now, further imagine, there is no body, there is no you, no sense of continuous consciousness. The lights illuminating down the hallway are vivid, zero-distance sense phenomena, sounds, colors, shapes, sensations, tastes, smells, and consciousness. Instead of lighting the way for you, they're simply coming into being, or at least their radiant nature is apparent, moment to moment. If viewed in a certain way by looking through the distorting lens of reflective consciousness, it could appear as if this creates movement down the hallway, or a sense of someone or some consciousness moving and aware of the lights. In actuality, consciousness is itself simply one of the vividly illuminated yet empty phenomena appearing and disappearing. In reality, there is no body, mind, or world. There is only illumination, and nothing apart from that illumination to know or to observe it. There is just a magnificent display of impossibly vivid and essenceless textures, creating the illusion of movement and solidity. It is self-illuminating and radically intimate. Here and gone. Here and gone.
Thank you, Glenn. And I told Glenn that it's a pretty deep reading, but my job is to make it simple. Now that my job is to make it simple in about 15 to 20 minutes. So I have my job cut out for me. So first of all, I will say, if you have no idea what I'm talking about when I say the 4 principles of God, this talk may be even more challenging for you, because the jumping off point will be the 4 principles of God. The fourth, but I'll use some other language too, which may be helpful, but the better you understand the 4 principles of God, at least intellectually, the easier this is going to be for you. The 4th principle of God is what is often referred to as the illusion, or referred to as the world. And Resta's song, Mirror, Mirror, was about starting at that 4th principle of God. And we're all very familiar with that 4th principle of God. That's where we think we are a person. And we have mirrors, but we actually have very dirty mirrors. In other words, as we look at the world, we're looking at the world through a dirty mirror. So, for example, we think, we look at Regina. Regina's looking at me, and I think Regina's judging me. I have no idea what's really going on in her head, but this is what my dirty mirror is saying, or I look out there and I see someone dressed a certain way and I think that's inappropriate and I judge that person. And, I could go on for all day long on what these dirty mirrors cause us to experience. But, there's a lot of fear, a lot of shame, a lot of unworthiness, a lot of guilt, a lot of judgment, a lot of defense, a lot of people for me, people against me, yada, 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 yada. So one of the jobs that we naturally experience on the spiritual path, some people experience it before what is called awakening. Some people experience it after what is called awakening, is cleaning off the mirror. We need a clear mirror at some point. And in my particular path, well, it depends on how you define awakening. I find these different definitions of awakening. So I don't know, I woke in here, and then I woke here, and then I woke here, by all these different definitions, right? It depends on where the heck you put the mark. But before I realized the I am presence, let's put it that way, I cleaned off the mirror. So I say I did it before awakening, although I have found definitions that describe experiences that I had earlier and call them awakening. So who knows? But in my perception of my path, I actually cleaned off the mirror prior to awakening. And it was only after I had a fairly clean mirror that I realized the I am presence. The I am presence is the 2nd principle of God. That's when there's a lot of clarity, even though the mind is still here and the mind is still chattering. That is just a roommate, as Stephen Mitchell describes. It is no longer seen as me. I see myself as the watching, right? And this is a space where I have been for some time. I don't remember exactly. I mean, at first it came in at glimpses. Then those glimpses became longer and longer. And then it just became much more steady with only occasional brief falling out of it. Right. So became very steady. What I didn't see until recently, maybe in the last 3 weeks, was that I had become identified with being the watching. And that's really what Angelo is talking about in these excerpts that have been read. I didn't see it at all until something, I think it was like one word. I was reading his book and like, this is a great book. I recommend it to everybody, but most of what he talks about is, I say, in my rearview mirror, right? This is a great book. Boy, he describes that well. Great book, great book. And then I hit a word. I mean, it was like one word. The word was self-reflective. I saw the word self-reflective somewhere in the middle of something. And it was like, boom. Suddenly I could see that there was still a reflection here. And that reflection was being identified with the watching. And as I continued to read, and he began to talk about this, by then the boom had already happened. So I understood what I was reading perfectly. And it's like everything else that I read in Angelo's book, or everything, I've been also listening to some of his videos. Everything that he is saying is only clarifying what occurred to me in that boom when I looked at that word, self-reflective. So we all know, those of us who know about the second principle of God and the first principle of God, we know that, there is an awakening from this fourth principle of God, this idea, I am a person, into this I am presence, which I refer to as the second principle of God. And then we know that there's this other awakening into this mysteriousness that I call the first principle of God. We also all know that Regina's purpose for retiring was to attempt to walk in that direction. And I think I found a crack in the doorway. So let me try and explain that crack to you. This does not mean I'm awake to the first principle, by the way. So let's not go misunderstanding that. It means I found a crack in the doorway. All right, let's be clear on that language. But let me see if I can share what that crack is. So I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to go to a picture of Regina. It's funny because lately I've been doing these videos about mirror, mirror, and I think these videos actually happened before I had this realization. But I think it was somehow in doing these videos, I think, of course, that was an assistance to this realization, right? But what we see in this picture is we see Regina, and of course, we see Regina again. But we're going to refer to this as I. So we see Regina, and we see I. But what I want you to do is I want you to imagine yourself as the I. Okay, so you're here looking in the mirror. And when you look in the mirror, you see a face. Now, when we originally look in this mirror, in the fourth principle of God, there's smudges all over. So we don't actually see this face clearly, right? And again, this is a person that's better than everyone else, or a person that's less than everyone else, or whatever the heck the story is, right? An anxious person, whatever. But eventually this mirror gets clear. And whatever this reflection is, we actually see it as something that I see. Now we've shifted our identity over here to the I am. I see what this body is doing. I see what's going on in this mind. I see the rest of the world, but I'm over here now. I'm no longer, even though I still see the mirror clearly, I'm not in the mirror anymore. I see the mirror, right? And this is a very definite shift that occurs. And it's a profound shift that occurs. But what Angelo is telling us is what we don't realize at this point is there's a function in consciousness or in the mind that is identifying. That's what it does. It identifies. And what we don't realize, because we've disidentified from what's in the mirror, that's not me anymore, right? We've disidentified from that. So we think we've disidentified. What we don't realize is the next thing that happens is we've identified as the watching. We've identified as the awareness. We've identified as the consciousness. But the identifying is still occurring. Now, the way Bernadette Roberts referred to this, for those of you who know my teachings of Bernadette Roberts, or if you read Bernadette Roberts yourself, Bernadette Roberts referred to this as you've transcended the ego. She calls this thing in the mirror the ego. When you think you're this, she calls this the ego. So she says you've transcended the ego, but now there's still a self, consciousness, the self. And that you don't really awaken until you come to the second awakening, which is when you go from consciousness as self to no self. The way I realized this, and then fortunately the way Angelo stated it, which helped to clarify for me, is he didn't use the word self, which I'd read over and over and over again, right? He used the word identity. What happens is, first you were identifying with the reflection in the mirror. Then when you awoke from that, without knowing it, this identity function, very, very subtle, is still working. And you identify as watching, or you identify as not the person. He calls it a negative, but he doesn't mean negative like bad feelings. He means negative like first you were something and now you are nothing, but you are still identifying. Is this making sense? Yeah. Isn't this incredible? The difference is in the first principle of God, that function of identifying has ceased. Bernadette Roberts, those of you who know her work, or again, my teaching about her work, refers to it as a reflexive mechanism of mind. See, you're still identifying. That's what the reflexive mechanism of mind is. It's identifying. And she says, she doesn't call it the first principle of God. She calls it the divine. But in the divine, the reflexive mechanism ceases to work. The identifying mechanism ceases to work. So let's imagine this. You guys ready for the next step? So step one, right? Fourth principle of God. I think I am this, and not only that, this mirror is very, very dirty. And so I have lots of thoughts about what I am, and lots of thoughts about what you are, and lots of thoughts about what the world is. And eventually that mirror gets cleaned off. And when that mirror gets cleaned off, I'm able to see that I am watching the mirror, right? I'm able to see that. I am watching the mirror. Now, in your own imagination, put yourself, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this screen for a second. I don't think I want you looking at it anymore. Imagine that you are looking in a mirror. I am watching the mirror, right? I am watching the body in the mirror. Now the mirror shatters. What do you see? Nothing. Can you see your face without the mirror? But are you this without the mirror? You still are this. You just can't see this anymore. You can't see a reflection of this. That's direct experience. What Angelo is saying is that at first, when you, quote, awaken, you see everything in the mirror. So we're talking about a clean mirror. You see everything in the mirror as one, and you're the watching of the one. That's still two. When the mirror shatters, there's no longer the watching, the watcher, whatever you want to call it. There's only the everything. It's just like suddenly being the face of everything. You can't see it, but you are it. Does this beginning to make some sense? You are everything, not you see everything. That was the second principle of God. The second principle of God is awareness of. I've taught this to you many times, right? The first principle of God is awareness without the of. No reflection, no identity, just being. And somehow when I saw that word self-reflective, when I was reading his book, it was just like, it's like I suddenly saw that somehow I could see both, and I've seen this before, that I could see the watching. So that wasn't new. I've seen this before, that I could see the watching. I've even taught that to you before. What was different was that I could see the identification with watching. That's what changed. And I could see that that was still self-reflection. And so then the question that immediately arose in my mind was, well, how do I practice not self-reflecting? Like if self-reflection is the problem, if identity is the problem, how do I practice not? And I discovered that by accident. And then I saw these videos by Angelo where he's reinforcing it. And my mind is saying, oh my God, Regina, don't do that. That's ridiculous. You're leaving the path. Don't do that. That's what you've been taught. And praise the Lord, I've got Angelo teaching it. This is the way this has often happened for me, that I'll discover something and then I discover a confirmation of the something to help me pass the doubt, right? And so praise the Lord, he's like my safety raft right now while my ego is saying, no, you're leaving the path. I'm not leaving the path. I'm leaving the current identification, maybe. But this is what's happening. This is the doorway I discovered. This is the crack in the doorway. I think this is probably what Bernadette Roberts meant by ecstasy, though who knows? What I have somehow discovered how to do, and I can't tell you that, because before I saw that word self-reflective and this boom happened, I don't think I could have done it. Okay. But what I've learned how to do when I go into meditation is that whatever arises, whether it be a sensation, a thought, or a sound, typically my eyes are closed. So I don't do it as much with the visual field, although sometimes I'm staring out a window and I can do it with the visual field as well. Whatever arises, I no longer look at it. I dive into it. That's the best way to describe it. I dive into it. So, like, let's say a thought shows up and the thought says, you shouldn't be doing this. You should be doing watching awareness meditation. I actually look at it first, probably because looking at it is what I know how to do because I'm watching, right? That's where I'm at now. That's my stage. So I look at it first, but then I dive into it. And it's almost like looking at it from the inside instead of from the outside. And merging with it, these, and there's no reflection there. I'm not looking at it like I was. So I dive into thoughts, I dive into sensations, I dive into sounds. I've noticed that I can feel. When I dive in, I can feel every sound. I don't just hear sound, I feel sound. I'm sure that's what he means by the sound is hearing, because I am the sound. I'm no longer the observer of the sound. And I want to tell you something else. I can't remember if it was the first, the second, or the third time I started doing this. I've only been meditating this way for, 3 weeks, except in the middle, there was a week where I couldn't do it. So 2 weeks, right? But I've only been meditating this way for like 3 weeks. But, in that first week, somewhere along in that first week, there was this egoic reaction that was incredible. I went into meditation. I started practicing in this way. There was this thought, I can't breathe. And there was this experience of not being able to breathe, of like having forgotten how to breathe. And so for seconds, I couldn't breathe. And then this memory came in, probably Regina Dawn Akers' own teaching, although there was no identification there, but this memory came in that whatever you believe, you will experience. And I realized that when the thought came in, I can't breathe, there was identification with that thought, and now I couldn't breathe. So I just stayed with that memory that popped in. Whatever you believe, you will experience. And then I decided to dive into the experience of not being able to breathe, and it vanished instantly. But then the next thing that happened was this incredible upset stomach. Like I was going to vomit right there and then, just so sick all of a sudden I was going to vomit. And I knew it was the exact same thing trying itself again. So I dove into that, and it also vanished. And since then, of course, you never know what's going to happen tomorrow, but since then, I haven't had an egoic reaction during the meditation. The meditations have been what I would describe as blissful or ecstasy. I would pick those two words. But when I'm not meditating, the middle word I'm not going to say all the way because I know this is going on YouTube and such, but here's what my mind is saying so many times during the day. Shit, fuck, damn. It's just like, I don't swear. It's like my mind has Tourette's all of a sudden, just out of the blue. It's like, shit, fuck, damn, you know? And every now and then it'll go, Jesus, you know, it's just like the mind is like not happy with this at all. And it does try to tell me that I've abandoned the path, that I should go back to awareness, watching awareness, that I should not be doing this. But, you know, it's the ego because it has all that judgment in it, right? You know, I mean, it sounds right. Hi, Jazz. Oh, Jazz just woke up and heard me going, shit, fuck, damn. I told her I was the minister this morning. Now, how do you put those two together? She's looking at me like I'm crazy. Now she's walking away. She's known us crazy for a long time. That's nothing new. So there's lots of resistance to this, which I take as a good sign. Right? I take it as a good sign. And so I'm moving forward. I feel like an experimenter, like an astronaut. I don't want to say follow me because I don't know where the hell I'm going. That's why I picked that first core value, that we each have our individual guidance and we support each other. Anything I'm asking for your support, which I know you give me, so there's no sense in even asking. And although I could probably talk about this all day, I feel like I've said what needs to be said for now. So, Sina, I'm going to let you go ahead and play our next song, which is called I Am Everything, but it has no words to it. It's just sounds because it's attempting to be a song that represents that first principle, no reflection, right? It's the best I could do with a song. It's by a lady named May Lan. And also why Sina plays this, if you feel to donate, you can donate with the link she will post, or you can find that little thing in gallery mode and donate with your iPhone or whatever. I guess your Android too. All right, Sina, take it away. Thank you. So probably what I would recommend is listening to this a few times, right? I also do recommend Angelo's book. No matter what level you're at, his book is helpful. I think it's maybe the best book I've ever read. I would put Untethered Soul in second place, but that used to be in first place. Now we have a new first place. Let me just share my screen and show that to you. Here we go. It's called Awake. It's Your Turn by Angelo Dilullo. He's somebody I never even heard of until a few weeks ago. I can't even quite remember how I ran across him. You know how those things happen. But there he is. And so I do recommend this book. The majority of it is about waking up from the fourth principle to the second principle. And then there's a hair in it, 5% of the book about waking up from the second principle to the first principle. So it's useful to everyone. We have like a minute. Is there anything that someone wants to say in this last minute? Hi, Joanne.
Hi, Regina. I just want to say thank you. That's all.
All right. Well, my stomach is growling, and as you guys know, what I do after church is eat breakfast. So I guess it's time for me to start heading in that direction. But thank you for letting me share this. Like I said, the ego did not want me to do it, did not want me to do it, did not want me to do it. And it's so wonderful to have you all here to be able to step over that and do it. All right. Thank you. All right. See you later. Bye.
Been watching our online gathering. It happens weekly on Sundays at 10:15 a.m. Eastern Time. To join us live in the sanctuary, visit our website awakening-together.org. You'll want to click on Online Sanctuary in the main menu, and then in the drop-down menu, look for How to Enter the Sanctuary. Right there at the top of the page is a clickable link. We'd love to see you in the sanctuary and join with you in fellowship. Thank you again for watching. Also, please know that if you'd like to stay connected via the Awakening Together channel here on YouTube, you can subscribe and hit the bell for more notifications. We hope to see you in the sanctuary.